Thanks. So kind of you. Thank you very much. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Konitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 75, text 25 through 26, and also text 27. So text 25 we'll chant together. Ataritvijo mahashilaham sadasya brahma vadinaham brahma kshatriya vitsudram rajano ye samagataham atar vijo mahashila sadasya brahma vadina brahma kshatriya vitsudra rajano ye samagata atat vijo mahashila sadasya brahma vadina brahma kshatriya vitsudra rajano ye samagata. Please chant. Atar vidyo mahashila sadasya brahma vadina brahma kshatriya vitsudra rajano ye samagata atar vidyo mahashila sadasya brahma vadina brahma kshatriya vitsudra Rajanoye Samagata. Thank you very much. I'll continue with the Sanskrit for text 26. Devashi Petrir Bhutani Loka Pala Sahanuga Pujitastam Anugnapya Svadamam Yayu Nirpam. And the word for word, Ata, then Ritvija, the priests, Mahashila, of exalted character, Sadasya, the officials of the sacrifice, Brahma, of the Vedas, Vadina, expert authorities, Brahma, the Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Kshatriyas, Vit, Vaishyas, Sudra, and Sudras, Ajana, the kings, Ye, who, Samagata, had come. So I'll just proceed to the translation for both texts 25 and 26. And this is by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, their translation. Then the highly cultured priests, the great Vedic authorities who had served as sacrificial witnesses, the specially invited kings, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, demigods, sages, forefathers, and mystic spirits, and the chief planetary rulers and their followers, all of them, having been worshipped by King Yudhisthira, took his permission and departed, O king, each for his own abode. There's no purport, BBT purport for those two verses. And now text 27. Hari dasasya rajase rajasuya mahodayam naivatripyan prasamsantaham pipan martyo mirtam yatam. And the translation for text 27 is as follows. Again, it's the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. As they all glorified the wonderful Rajasuya Yagya performed by that great saintly king and servant of Lord Hari, they were not satiated, just as an ordinary man is never satiated when drinking nectar. And no BBT purport. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padansa Gana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamsha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimata Ramapada Swami Tinamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Navishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll just reread the translation. Then the highly cultured priests, the great Vedic authorities who had served as sacrificial witnesses, the specially invited kings, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, demigods, sages, forefathers, and mystic spirits, and the chief planetary rulers and their followers, all of them, having been worshipped by King Yudhisthira, took his permission and departed, O king, each for his own abode. In the next text, as they all glorified the wonderful Rajasuya Yagya performed by their great saintly king and servant of Lord Hari, they were not satiated, just as an ordinary man is never satiated when drinking nectar. Now, there is a very short commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the first two texts, 25 and 26, where he states the following. So these are his words. Yudhisthira worshipped the priests of exalted character, Mahashila, and others, close quote. So that's the commentary of Srila Vishwanath. Now, this particular aspect of worship on the part of King Yudhisthira, it's described by Srila Prabhupada, and I'm going to read from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where Srila Prabhupada describes the same moment. After taking his bath, King Yudhisthira, and this actually was the previous text to what we're reading today, but I'm leading into it because this is Srila Prabhupada describing. After taking his bath, King Yudhisthira, dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper, and decorated himself with valuable jewels. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and the others who had participated in the yagya. In this way, he worshipped them all. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayan, he knew how to treat everyone well. Close quote. So that's Srila Prabhupada writing on this particular section. Now, there's an explanation given by Srila Prabhupada regarding King Yudhisthira knowing how to treat everyone well. And it's based on his being a Vaishnava. So, treating everyone well rests on his being a Vaishnava. So it might sound like circular reasoning that you're a Vaishnava and therefore you treat everyone well, or you treat everyone well because you're a Vaishnava. So if we look at it more closely, treating everyone well rests on holding a particular understanding that is specific to a Vaishnava. And that is that every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. An understanding that differs from that, let's say, of Mayavadi or impersonalist yogis, who, and these are Srila Prabhupada's words, they attempt to see everyone as God in an artificial attempt at oneness. Those are Srila Prabhupada's words. They're actually artificially attempting a kind of oneness. So everybody's the same and attempting to see everyone as God. So quite different because on the part of the Vaishnavas, because they've seen everyone as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So not that they are the Supreme Lord, so a difference. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada concludes, and this is all pertinent to what we're hearing, that King Yudhisthira knew how to behave well, and he knew how to behave well because he's a Vaishnava. And this is what Srila Prabhupada's conclusion is. A Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on an absolute platform. So it's on a very elevated level of understanding. And he uses a simile to explain it. And this is how Srila Prabhupada explains how a Vaishnava is treating others. As one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part because they all belong to the same body, a Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal, because in both he sees the soul and the super soul seated together. So it can apply also, doesn't see distinctions between human beings, because generally the tendency is to look on the external and look in terms of ethnicity or the particular ashram or the varna of the particular entity. But the Vaishnava does not actually look at that external aspect, but he's seeing that every single human being, every single animal, every single piece of vegetation, every single living entity, be they in the water or on the land, they all belong to the same body being the Supreme Lord. Now, the fact that Maharaj Yudhishthir worshipped the priests of exalted character and others, because that's what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary is, who had participated in the yagya or the sacrifice, points to a particular path that King Yudhishthir is following, and that path is the path of a Vaishnava, just by way of going deeper into an understanding of his particular behavior. Now, there's a conversation that happens between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit much earlier on in the Bhagavatam, in the 6th canto, in the 1st chapter, where Srila Sukadev Goswami summarizes this path of Vaishnavism. And this is how he puts it. The path followed by pure devotees who are well behaved and fully endowed with the best qualifications is certainly the most auspicious path in the material world. It is free from fear and it is authorized by the Shastras. So there's the encapsulation by Srila Sukadev Goswami for personalities that are pure devotees and are on this path of Vaishnavism. The overriding characteristic is that they're well behaved and they're fully endowed with the best qualifications. So it means they're carrying extraordinary qualities. So naturally, it's considered the most auspicious path. So if one's following that path, one's going to come to this point of being endowed with extraordinary qualities and being well behaved. It's the overriding characteristic of somebody on this path of Vaishnavism. And further, notice, free from fear, and it's also a path that the Shastras are authorizing. Now, Srila Prabhupada, in commenting on this statement of Srila Sukadev Goswami, he tackles a misconception. And this is very important because he likes to contrast Vaishnava philosophy with Mayavad philosophy. So Srila Prabhupada said, so this is a misconception that's held by Mayavadis, and this is what Srila Prabhupada tackles. One should not think, Srila Prabhupada's words, that the person who takes to bhakti is one who cannot perform the ritualistic ceremonies recommended in the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, or that the person is not sufficiently educated to speculate on spiritual subjects. Mayavadis generally allege that the bhakti path is for women and illiterates. So it's quite incredible conception held by impersonalist philosophers. And Srila Prabhupada carries on, this is a groundless accusation. He views it as an accusation. So Srila Prabhupada gives the proof for why it is that this particular, you could say, belief held by the impersonalist Mayavadi philosophers that the path of Vaishnavism or bhakti is one that's for less intelligent persons, illiterate persons. He gives the proof by citing those who are followers of the bhakti path. And Srila Prabhupada says, see, There's learned scholars such as the Goswamis. They were followers of the path of bhakti. There's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and there's Ramanujacharya. They were all followers on the path of bhakti. So that's the proof. It's not a valid accusation that this path is only for illiterate persons or women. I mean, presumably women are seen as somehow less intelligent by the Mayavadis. Now, Lord Chaitanya makes an interesting statement which shows both his adherence to the path of bhakti and the difficulty of understanding this path. So he's acknowledging that it's not so easy to understand the path of bhakti or Vaishnavism. And this is how Lord Chaitanya puts it. Unalloyed love of Krishna is like the ocean of happiness. If someone gets one drop of it, the whole world can drown in that drop. It is not befitting to express such love of Godhead, yet a madman must speak. However, even though he speaks, no one believes him. So, Lord Chaitanya very intelligently points out that indeed it can be difficult to understand this path of Vaishnavism. But it's so extraordinary that one drop of having love of Godhead can drown the whole world. So it's, and that comes from Madhya Leela, 2nd chapter, 49th verse. Lord Chaitanya is speaking about this difficulty. So there's some sympathy for the Mayavadis not being able to grasp the particularly exalted position of the Vaishnava being so intimately connected with the Supreme Lord, that the love is such that even a little drop can inundate the whole world. Now, a personality such as Maharaj Yudhisthira, he can be called a Mahajan, for this is the term given to those who have taken to the path of devotional service. And there's a very nice text that defines this. Shushila Sadavo Yantra Narayana Parayana. So this is the path of the Mahajans. It's a path of devotional service. And such personalities as Maharaj Yudhisthira, they can be called perfect persons. And the reason for this is that unflinching devotion, like nothing distracts the person, that's their path. That unflinching devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods. And to understand what are those extraordinary qualities that are just like those of demigods for somebody who is a Mahajan, who's on that path of Vaishnavism and is on a very advanced level of purity, we can hear what are some of those qualities. And this comes from a prayer by the residents of Jambudweep. And this is what they say. All the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service and engaged in material activities has no good qualities. Even if he is adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives, he must be driven by his own mental speculation and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. So that's the distinction that's made between a person who's a Vaishnava on the devotional path and a person even who may be very honestly and nicely maintaining his family, or even somebody who's practicing some yogic path. Still, there's one important difference, and that is that the Vaishnava, is not subject to just being on the mental plane where he has to speculate what needs to be done or how things are arranged or how he makes his decisions, all on the mental plane. So it means that he's actually at the mercy of the external energy of the Lord as opposed to being in the internal energy of the Lord. And so being directed directly by the Lord. So there's a big difference. So the residents of Jambudweep, they say of somebody who is under the control of the external energy of the Lord, meaning they're just functioning on the mental plane, how can there be any good qualities in such a man? It means that there isn't a progressive focus, a progressive concentration, an elevation of consciousness that is happening through being so intimately connected to the Supreme Lord. So therefore, good qualities can't develop because there has to be that focus and that connection with the Supreme Lord to allow for the development of good qualities. And so it becomes possible to distinguish a Vaishnava from a non-Vaishnava. And one can identify what are these exalted qualities, because we're hearing just this point that Maharaj Yudhisthira is so well behaved. So what are these exalted qualities that a Vaishnava has? So there's a listing of them, and I think it's very interesting to go through it. He's very kind to everyone. That's a distinguishing characteristic of a Vaishnava. He does not make anyone his enemy. Another interesting characteristic. He's truthful. He's equal to everyone. No one can find any fault in him. So naturally, it's difficult to find fault in somebody who's always truthful, who's very kind to everyone, who doesn't make anyone his enemy. He's magnanimous. And we've been hearing that's the whole particular focus in the verses we're doing, the magnanimity of King Yudhisthira. He's magnanimous. He's mild. He's always clean. I mean, we're hearing King Yudhisthira, part of the ritualistic ceremony. He's a bath is involved. So there's emphasis on cleanliness. He's always clean. He's without possessions. So, that may appear questionable because you're hearing about Maharaj Yudhisthira having valuable jewels and silken garments, but it's more the attachment to those material objects. So he's without possessions by virtue of the fact that there isn't that great attachment. He works for everyone's benefit. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. He's very peaceful. He's always surrendered to Krishna. He has no material desires. He's very meek. He's steady. He controls his senses. He does not eat more than required. He's not influenced by the Lord's illusory energy. He offers respect to everyone. And again, that's something we've seen so graphically in this text of Maharaj Yudhisthira. It specifically is commented by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that not only is he respectful to the extraordinary priests that were officiating the sacrifice, but he's actually respectful to everyone. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, and others, so everyone. He does not desire any respect for himself. He's very grave, he's merciful, he's friendly, he's poetic, he's expert, he is silent. So those are some of the qualities that are listed for somebody on the path of Vaishnavism by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the Adi Leela in the 5th chapter, the 18th verse. So clearly, the quality that's prominent in King Yudhisthira is his kindness to everyone. The path he's followed is indeed influenced by the Shastras, because that's one of the important aspects of Vaishnava, that he's following a path that's actually recommended by the Shastras. As Lord Krishna indicates, and this is in Bhagavad Gita 18.5, Krishna says, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purifies even the great souls. And that's what we've been hearing here. King Yudhisthira has been engaging in an act of sacrifice. I mean, of course, on a magnificent scale, but and he is a great soul, being on the path of Vaishnavism. But we see that he's acting completely in accord with the instructions of Shastra. Lord Krishna is speaking that these acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance have to be performed. They must be performed because of the fact that they purify even the great souls. So that act performed by King Yudhisthira as a Bhakti Yogi, a Vaishnava, is an act performed for the advancement of human society because he's in a royal position. And by virtue of the sacrifice, he's actually positioned as the emperor of the entire world, so the monarch of monarchs. And he's performing that sacrifice not for his own self-aggrandizement, but for the advancement of human society. And why that is so is because he has established Lord Krishna as the preeminent personality to be worshipped. And we read this description. Here's the description. After bathing Lord Krishna's lotus feet, Maharaj Yudhisthira joyfully sprinkled the water upon his own head and then upon the heads of his wife, brothers, other family members, and ministers. That water purifies the whole world. As he honored the Lord with presentations of silken garments and precious jeweled ornaments, the king's tear-filled eyes prevented him from looking directly at the Lord. That was the description given in the 74th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So one can note that Maharaj Yudhisthira is making it quite clear. He's establishing Lord Krishna as the preeminent personality to be worshipped. And there's also a description of his magnanimity. So, because these are all qualities of the greatly exalted Vaishnavas. So here's a description of his magnanimity. Emperor Yudhisthira gave generous gifts to the sacrificial priests and members of the assembly, properly honoring them all in the manner prescribed in the Vedas. He then took the Avabrita bath. So again, magnanimity. He gives to everyone. Generous gifts. And in addition, King Yudhisthira clearly was working for everyone's benefit. And the reason one can know that he was working for everyone's benefit, it's evidenced by their satisfaction. And this is the description. The demigods, humans, and residents of intermediate heavens, all properly honored by the king, and that is what we were reading, happily set off for their respective domains while singing the praises of Lord Krishna and the great sacrifice. So clearly, they were satisfied. So we can understand that King Yudhisthira was working for their benefit, and they in turn were very satisfied. So there's to understand how King Yudhisthira actually was benefiting everyone through the great sacrifice. There's a listing of 30 qualities that people need in order to be educated in society to achieve happiness and peace. And these particular qualities that bring this happiness and peace and that people have to be educated in was actually the work of the king. So King Yudhisthira had that task. He had to educate all the citizens in these particular qualities. So the particular qualities that allow for happiness and peace in society are the following, and these come from a book entitled The Varnashram Manifesto by Harikesh Swami. So he creates the many acts. So the particular instructions of the Supreme Lord at the sacrifice, Sahadev had said this of Lord Krishna. So just so that one understands how even at the time of the sacrifice, there's education that's happening for all the people. And this is what Sahadev says of Lord Krishna. He creates the many activities of this world, and thus by his grace, the whole world endeavors for the ideals of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. So put it in summary, what the whole world is working towards. Therefore, we should give the highest honor to Krishna, the Supreme Lord. If we do so, we will be honoring all living beings and also our own selves. If we remember that every living entity is part of the body of the Supreme Lord, is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, as Sahadev says, if one gives the highest honor to Krishna, then we will also be honoring all living entities and also our own selves. So now, there's another thing that needs to be understood by society in general, and that society has to be educated in, is that there has to be discussion of these transcendental activities and instructions given by Krishna. Another thing that society has to be educated in is that they need to remember the Lord's activities and instructions. Another thing that society has to be educated in is they have to try to render service to the Supreme Lord. They have to worship the Supreme. And Sahadev's statement at the sacrifice, it actually states that by the mercy of Krishna, all the karmic activities of the entire world and their fruits as well are realized by this worship. It's proper to worship Krishna because Krishna's mercy alone on this earth planet, by that mercy one can perform austerities, yoga, and other practices for self-realization. It requires his mercy to be able to perform, whether it's yoga, whether it's austerity, it requires Krishna's mercy. And from Krishna alone, all persons gain auspicious results from the pursuit of their Dharma. Another thing that citizens in the world have to be educated in is to offer obeisances to the Supreme Lord. And at the sacrifice, there's exactly that results from how everything is arranged. And this is a description at the particular sacrifice of Maharaj Yudhisthira. When they saw Lord Krishna thus honored, so they seen the king, the emperor of the world, honoring Lord Krishna. And when the citizens are seeing Lord Krishna honored, nearly all who were present joined their palms, reverentially exclaiming, obeisances to you, all victory to you, and then bowed down to Krishna. So you can see how it's what the ruler is dictating is educating all the citizens in how to function correctly to bring about peace and happiness. And another thing that they require education is that they need to be educated to aspire to be servants of the Supreme Lord. Another thing, they need to be educated to recognize the Lord as the supreme friend. And finally, they have to be educated to surrender their whole existence to the Lord. And this is the role of the ruler. And Maharaj Yudhisthira certainly, just by actually reading this text of today, where everybody is leaving in such a satisfied mood, one understands that he is correctly performing his task as the ruler to educate the citizens in such a way that it's going to bring peace and happiness to the whole of society. So these were some thoughts on the text of today. If there's anything that can expand the discussion, please feel free.
It's a very nice subject matter. Um, I've been preparing something for Bhagavad Gita, and His Holiness Ramapa Swami has this presentation of the Gita values, and um, he explains that there's many values that are given in the Gita, but there are six that has been sort of um, a list of six that when they're established, these values, they have naturally, they open for the other values to manifest. And he also explains how these values, they are very much at the center of the culture of the Vaishnava culture, the culture of Krishna consciousness. And the values will naturally affect the behaviors, which is, the discussion of, today and these verses in terms of the, the etiquette and the character and the behavior of the Vaishnava. And underneath so the values are directly under the behaviors and the external manifestations, and the etiquette that is manifested by the Vaishnava. And under the values is the very deep-seated beliefs that one holds. So obviously, the belief of the Vaishnava is that I'm a servant of Krishna. I'm part and parcel of Krishna. And Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one have to render loving devotional service to Krishna. So all that is established in the Vaishnava. So the six, um, the six values that has been sort of singled out as most important, or we'll say most important is not, that's not what he say, but it's more or less that has been, it's a list that has been shortened, that it very much affects the others. The first one is Samadarshana, which is equal vision, and is one that was discussed today, in terms of being able to have the capacity to see everyone from the transcendental position, and that's a quality of a Vaishnava. And so, equal vision is able to deal and properly manage diversity. In general, that's, well, most of us feel, how do you say,
Fall short.
fall short. That, to be able to broaden our capacity to see beyond externals and being able to relate as a spirit soul. So Samadarshana. The next one is Ahimsa, non-violence. The next one is Acharya. One have to show by example. One have to be an example for others and teach by example. That's the Acharya principle. Icha means one have a choice. So the value of having the capacity to choose. And there's all big discussions on this, but that's, it's a whole seminar, Srila Swami. And the next one is, let me see, Acharya, violence. One is love, pretty. The when you're doing something, you're doing it with that type of devotion and love. It's not something that is forced, or you're torturing yourself for doing it, but you actually really love to do it. When you choose to do something, it's done with that type of devotion and love. So it's a beautiful value. And I'm missing one that I can't remember right now, but maybe tomorrow I talk about it. But it's really nice. And then the other thing that I wanted to add, and then I leave that is that he explains that obviously for most of us, or many of us, we find ourselves in this liminal space, that there is the qualities of the Vaishnavas, such as Maharaj Yudhisthira. Those are the ideals that are given there, the Vaishnava that has all these qualities. But to have all these qualities, you really have to be in Krishna consciousness, just like these great Vaishnavas. To be able to see equally, you have to be Krishna conscious. And then here's where we are, and we have to cross that big gap. And so that's a liminal space. And he explains that if we follow Krishna and we take shelter of Krishna, then we should be able to cross it. So eventually, like that. So it's really nice.
Well, thank you very much for doing the breakdown in terms of 6 qualities that indicate the values held by Vaishnavas. Yeah, that's a very interesting point made by His Holiness Ramapada Swami, that there's that space in between where one may not actually be in that state of purity of Krishna consciousness, where the qualities have developed as a result of holding those values. So the value and the quality, there's no discrepancy. They're together. But instead, the value may be there, but actually the behavior may be otherwise, because still the mind and the intelligence has to do a lot of adjustment. So thank you for bringing up that point. Yes, probably the most difficult one is indeed that one of the equal vision, where one is actually able to indeed see every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore is able to actually behave well towards every living entity. Because naturally, the tendency, if with that gap between the value and the behavior and the mind one has and one's intelligence that isn't yet adjusted, the natural, it seems natural, the tendency is to identify with a particular group that has a similar outlook to oneself. So that can mean then that there's discrimination towards another group that doesn't look the same or doesn't seem to hold the same value, or it looks different. So yes, the diversity aspect is the most challenging one. The most challenging one. So thank you very much for bringing up that there's that need to cross that space before coming to actually having no discrepancy between the value and the behavior. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for your very kind attention. I'm most grateful. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.